2025 was all in all a shit year for me, but it was a pretty solid gaming year for me though. At the start of 2025, I had set myself a goal of hitting credits on at least one game per month, and I absolutely smashed that goal, having finished a total of 30 games throughout the year. And I'm pretty proud of myself, I'm not gonna lie. All throughout, I was documenting my gaming journey in a spreadsheet just for myself to somewhat gamify my backlog, and I thought it'd be fun to share some of my thoughts with you and rank every game I played in 2025. The games listed here are only games that I finished. There are many more games I played this year that I either dropped or am still playing through, but I don't fully feel comfortable ranking those just yet. The games listed are also all games that I either rolled credits on this year or played for the first time this year in the case of live service games, of which there are none on the list actually. This is mainly to filter out any live service game that I still play casually, such as Overwatch or The Sims 4. I don't feel it's appropriate to include them on the list. For the same reason, replays will not be included on this list either, though I don't think I replayed any game this year. But if I had, that would not be included. Anyway, let us not dilly-dally, ladies, gents, and miscellaneous. We'll go in ascending order, starting from the bottom and working our way to the top. I guess I will start with a little bit of a dishonorable mention because I did drop a single game this year. It was a game called Best Served Cold. But as I did not finish it, I don't really feel comfortable ranking it, but it was a game that didn't really work for me. I felt like the gameplay loop was a little underbaked. It just didn't work. So unfortunately, I only did the first case of that and ended up dropping it, and I don't think I'm gonna come back to it, to be honest. But anyway, let's start the list proper with our 30th placer here. At the bottom of the list, we have Otogiriso. This is a bit of an unfair entry as I only played a single route of this before giving up, but it was not for a lack of trying. Okay, let me explain. This year, Otogiriso was translated by a group by the name of Translated Games, and since I knew it's considered a groundbreaking entry in the visual novel medium, I decided to give it a go. However, after I completed one route, the emulator I was playing on crashed and wouldn't let me go back to the main menu, and thanks to save states, I basically soft-locked the game, so I couldn't play any more routes. I will say though that what I got out of that single route was pretty lackluster, and I didn't really care to play more anyway, so I don't think I'll be revisiting the game anytime soon, regardless of if I can make it work or not. Both by default and by choice, Otogiriso is coming in at the bottom of the pack in 30th place. But take that with a massive grain of salt. Murder by Numbers is an Ace Attorney-inspired game that only copies the investigation portions, and all of the gameplay is replaced with Picross. I liked it fine enough, I do love me some Picross, but I found the story to be subpar, which is a big knock on the game, since it's mostly narrative-driven. The setup is fine enough, but I found the characters to be poorly written and somewhat contradictory. The main character, Honor, I especially took issues with. Her personality would fluctuate on a dime. One instant she'd be snarky and cynical, the next she'd be impulsive, bright-eyed, and bushy-tailed. I just didn't buy her as a character, and the same goes for the rest of the cast. The game also bordered on being just straight-up propaganda. The game takes place in LA of the 90s, and one of the main characters is an officer at the LAPD who doesn't play by the book, and that's framed as a good thing, which is a choice and a half, especially when one of the cases centers around a queer bar. That whole case left a pretty bad taste in my mouth, and I felt like it lacked a lot of nuance concerning the relationship between queer communities and state violence, especially when the game is set in a time so close after the AIDS pandemic and the subsequent ACT UP movement. This was the most blatant example of the dissonance between the time period and the writing, but I felt it all throughout the game. Nothing about this version of LA felt era-appropriate outside of some of the aesthetic choices, and instead, everything read like it came straight from the 2010s. Of course, Murder by Numbers is not a true-to-life story. One of the main characters is a floating television, but this dissonance made the story feel artificial to a point where I just couldn't suspend my disbelief and was taken out of the story. Murder by Numbers is a decent enough Picross game, but needed a more competent writing team behind it to stand alongside the games it wishes to emulate. If you like Picross, you'll probably enjoy it fine enough, but I personally would have rather have just played some other Picross game that doesn't have an underwhelming story. Banger soundtrack though. Luminite or Luminite, what? I don't know how to pronounce this. Luminite. Luminite is actually a pretty solid game. It's another Ace Attorney-inspired detective game where you play as a police detective and his daughter later on while they solve various murders. And of course, you'll discover a larger conspiracy connecting them as the game progresses. The story is quite good. I love a good murder mystery, and so I had no trouble getting invested in the game story as you slowly unravel the mystery of what's going on. However, the elephant in the room is the English translation because it is so ass, it completely ruins the experience. Like, we're talking Google Translate level of quality. It cheapens the story significantly, but even worse than that, it also negatively impacts the gameplay significantly. At some points, you have to construct sentences to deduce what is going on, but because the wording is off, it's pretty much impossible to figure out what the game is asking of you. Ciphers are also a significant theme of both the story and the gameplay, which by design requires a careful hand to do correctly, and that's just not present in this translation. So half the time you're fighting in the game just to figure out what you're supposed to be doing, which makes for a very frustrating experience. I also hated the stealth segments throughout the game, but mileage will vary on that. I just personally don't care all that much for stealth in games. It's just not really my genre. It's a shame that the translation is this bad, as I otherwise think the game would have been pretty great. Like I said, I thought the story was interesting, and I think the gameplay of the ciphers could have been a lot of fun if I had any idea what I was doing. The art is also beautiful, there's some great character designs, and the animation is very well done. Lumi Night desperately needs a retranslation, and until then, I don't think anyone who doesn't speak Korean should touch it. Myst is one of those classic, groundbreaking games that I thought I would love and have been itching to try. So this year, I finally gave it a go, and I was pretty underwhelmed. I liked it fine enough, but for the most part, it just didn't click with me. The puzzles were either unintuitive or bland, though the latter could be due to me playing the game through a 2025 lens. The story was initially intriguing, and I found the setup to be interesting, but as the game went on, I found myself losing interest in it more and more. And by the time I hit credits, I didn't really care much about any of it. Another one of those classic games I'm glad I gave a go, but not one I'll be revisiting or thinking about too much. There are better puzzle adventure games out there, but I appreciate what Myst did for the genre. Duck Detective: The Secret Salami was pretty cute, and that's basically where my critique of it ends. It was just cute. It's a short little detective game, about 2 or 3 hours or so, where you play as a private eye duck who is hired by a bus company to figure out some mystery or another. I don't really remember exactly what happened in the game. Something to do with illegal smuggling of salami, I don't know. I love the art style and I enjoyed the humor fine enough, but it also felt somewhat underbaked, to be quite honest. I felt it needed to be longer and have a bit more meat to it to really stand out. I guess, pun intended. As it stands, the game feels more like a proof of concept than a full game. The main gameplay mechanic is Obra Dinn style and worked decently well, yet felt like it could use some refinement as it allows you to cheese your way through the game and occasionally forces you to operate on the game's logic, though that's often the case with detective games, so I don't really fault the game too much for that. If you're into quirky little meme games, then this could be for you, but that's never really gonna be my bag. I might check out the sequel though, we'll see. Demon Masquerade, or Damon Masquerade, I don't know, is another detective game I tried this year. I was going through a bit of a detective game craze, okay, don't judge me. It was pretty good, I'd say, especially for a game that was made in Ren'P, which I was honestly shocked when I found that out. The premise was pretty interesting, and the gameplay was also quite unique compared to most other detective games I played, as it's the only game I played where you're constantly getting new evidence since the game takes place over the span of a week or so. Unfortunately, some of the mysteries were a bit underwhelming, and sometimes you're just waiting for the game to give you the information that tells you the answer. I would have liked to have been able to figure things out for myself a little bit more. The ending was an absolute flop though, unfortunately bordering on cringeworthy. The final reveal felt like it came out of nowhere, and everything got wrapped up just a tad too neatly for me, which significantly harmed the otherwise solid world building. I pretty much exclusively picked up Mind Over Magnet due to it being made by Game Maker's Toolkit, and I'm glad I did, because I think it's a pretty cute short little puzzle game. I hate to be a broken record, but once again, the game felt a bit too short for me. It was just starting to feel like it was exiting the tutorial when the game was basically over. What was on offer though was pretty cute, and I liked it fine enough. The puzzles were intuitive and fun, and at no point did I get stumped on what I was meant to do. The story was nothing to write home about, but it served its purpose fine enough. I would love to see the ideas here expanded upon in a sequel if he feels up to it. Vemba is one of those games I had heard a lot of people raving about, and it received a lot of critical buzz on launch, so I decided to check it out, and I was somewhat underwhelmed by it, unfortunately. It's a cooking game where you play as an Indian immigrant mother living in Canada, and throughout the game you will cook various Indian cuisine while witnessing short snippets of her life. I enjoyed the cooking the most, but felt that the gameplay segments were far too sparse. I would have liked at least 5 more recipes to be in the game for it to feel satisfying. It felt to me like the game just barely scratched the surface of its main hook. The story was cute though. I really grew to care for the main character, and there was one specific gameplay section that I felt reached a level of brilliance worthy of the game's critical praise, but otherwise the gameplay felt almost incidental and isolated from the other half of the game, that being the visual novel style parts. I also just couldn't help but compare it to another game that came out around the same time that tackles Vemba's main theme significantly better while also discussing many other topics with absolute grace, that didn't receive nearly the same amount of critical praise as Vemba did, but we'll get to that game much later on this list. But yeah, like with so many of these short indies, I felt there needed to be just a bit more to Vemba to really hit it home. Strange Jigsaws is exactly what it says on the tin. It's a bunch of strange jigsaw puzzles. I enjoyed it for the most part. Mileage will vary for each individual puzzle, but as a whole, I loved how much the developer explored the concept of a jigsaw. I will say though, I was a little disappointed by how many of the puzzles weren't jigsaws and instead were logic puzzles. Like, it's kind of antithetical to the whole premise. Due to the nature of this type of game, some of the puzzles hit and others didn't, and mileage will vary on which ones are hits and which ones are misses. Nice little short one-off title to sink your teeth into for an afternoon, but not a game I've spent any amount of time thinking about since rolling credits. Escape from Mistwood Mansion is a pretty classic escape room game, which I quite enjoyed. It's pretty short, I think it's like 5 levels total, but it somehow felt like just the right amount to me. The puzzles were fun without being too obtuse. I never felt like I couldn't figure things out on my own, and the only time I had to look up something was to figure out how to unlock the final level, which I actually didn't love that it was locked up in the first place, especially since the final level was by far the weakest of those on offer. There wasn't really a story, which I felt was a bit of a missed opportunity. It's so easy to add environmental storytelling in these escape room type games, and what little was there was pretty underwhelming. Paper Perjury is essentially an Ace Attorney clone, which is its biggest boon and its biggest flaw. When you're copying an already popular video game series, you need to innovate a bit more to have your own identity. Instead, Paper Perjury felt a little bit too derivative to me, which made it impossible to not compare the two. And Paper Perjury just doesn't have the same high highs that can be found in Ace Attorney. I also felt like the developers were unsure of what they wanted to say with the game, and so the entire story ends up just being a little underbaked. Again, a big strength of the Ace Attorney franchise is its recurring theme of critiquing corruption within law enforcement and government, and Paper Perjury just lacked any sort of through line. Still, I love Ace Attorney, so I was primed to like this game, and since AA7 seems to be missing in action, this was a good way to satiate my craving for the series while we wait on the next entry. Derivative though it may be, the Ace Attorney formula is a strong one that has kept the franchise going for all these years for a reason. This year, I decided to hack my 3DS. Please don't sue me, Nintendo, but since they're no longer producing games for the console and have now closed the online store, I think piracy is the only ethical way to play on the console these days, considering scalpers are already running amok in these eBay streets. Especially since I live in a country where shipping can cost more than the product itself. And there is also not really a secondhand market in my country, which sucks, but it is what it is. With that being said, I played Luigi's Mansion on the 3DS this year, and I liked it fine enough. The game has a lot of charm. I love the setting and the Halloween-y vibes to where I really wish I'd played it in October and not November like I did. That one's on me. I was also surprised to find out that critics didn't like the length of it when it first came out. To me, it was the perfect length and didn't overstay its welcome. But here come the negatives. The controls were a bit wonky, which I've read is most likely due to me playing the 3DS version, but of course I don't have a point of comparison, so I can't be certain of that. I also have never really been a big Mario person, as I'm a story player first and foremost, and Mario games usually lack in that department. It was fine for what it was, but I would have liked more depth. I also hated the final boss. I think it bugged out on me or something. Or maybe it was just another aspect of the wonkiness, because when I did what I was supposed to do the first time, it just didn't work. And so I obviously thought I was doing something wrong. So I spent a while struggling until I gave up, and I ended up looking up the solution, only to find out I did the right thing the first time and it just didn't work. Very annoying, but whatever. I definitely see the appeal and get why the game and its sequels have had so much staying power, but this game was never really gonna be my bag, I think. A pretty average experience in my book, but nonetheless a positive one. I don't think I'll go out of my way to check out the sequels though. Is This Seat Taken is a very cute and short puzzle game, albeit a little bit too short for my tastes. Felt like the game was just getting started by the time I was rolling credits. You're tasked with delegating seats in various venues or transportation to these shape people, all of which have their own requirements, such as not wanting to feel cold or sit next to a stinky shape. The puzzles were simple enough, logic puzzles, and none took too long to figure out, but I felt the ideas could have been expanded much further. I felt there could have been more complex puzzles later on, and I didn't love that some of the levels were repeats in concept from previous ones. Still, worth a play for anyone who enjoys cozy puzzle games. Also features a surprisingly cute story about a rumpus wanting to make it big in the film industry. I couldn't help but root for the little guy. Urban Myth Dissolution Center is yet another Ace Attorney-like that I tried this year, but this one stood out much more than the previous ones, I would say, due to its unique premise and art style. Same as any other of these AA-likes, the game is split up into different chapters or cases where you investigate a reporting of some urban myth and must solve the mystery by the end. This time around, you're not in the role of law enforcement, but you are instead a college student who by chance ends up getting involved with the center. But of course, there's more going on with her as we go along. In AA fashion, the various cases end up all tying together by the end. I mostly enjoyed my time with the game, but I also felt that it somewhat overstayed its welcome. Unlike Ace Attorney and most of its imitators who have 4 to 5 chapters, Urban Myth Dissolution Center has 7 chapters total. I felt the last 2 or 3 chapters were a bit of a slog to play through, as the gameplay formula wasn't varied enough to not get stale. To use Ace Attorney as an example once more, there you alternate between 2 gameplay modes, the investigation portions and the trial portions. But in Urban Myth Dissolution Center, it's pretty much just the investigation portion the whole time. The player also doesn't really do all that much investigative work themselves. Mostly you're just walking around and finding clues that slowly unravels the mystery, much more akin to the plot progression of a mystery novel than a detective game. There are some gameplay parts where you're prompted to make deductions, but rarely are you figuring something out yourself. Usually it's just compiling information you've already been giving throughout the investigation. I also heavily disliked the social media research portions. They were interesting the first few times, but they grew to be stale and tedious very quickly. Despite those flaws, I did enjoy my time with the game, and it culminated in a very satisfying climax by the end, so I felt the journey was worth the destination. I have very mixed feelings about Spiritfarer. On the one hand, it's a beautiful and emotional roller coaster of a ride, and on the other, it can be a bit of a frustrating resource management game. I guess I'll start with the highlights. The real strength of the game is twofold: the story and the art direction. Spiritfarer is absolutely beautiful to look at, from the art style to the animation to the color palette. It's a gorgeous game. I absolutely love the animation of the spirits especially, each was bursting with personality. And then we have the story, which is impossible to not have an emotional reaction to, considering the game's main theme of death and tying up loose ends. My favorite spirits and their stories made the experience for me, those being Atul, Summer, Alice, and Stanley. I also quite enjoyed the Dari and Jackie storyline, which I believe was additional content in the Farewell edition, which is the one I was playing, but I'm not completely sure about that. Others were more of a mixed bag, ranging from alright to forgettable. Elena, Mickey, and Buck I didn't vibe with at all, and Beverly just felt like a retread of Alice's story. She felt a little bit superfluous to me. I also think the endgame spirits suffered a bit, as you don't spend as much time with them. And once you do get to meet them, you'll have the tools to race through their story, so they're basically gone before you get to really care about them. I also enjoyed the gameplay for the most part, at least early on. I always felt like I had something to strive towards, so it was easy to keep playing for hours on end. However, there were moments where I would get stuck because I lacked a certain resource and had no idea how to acquire it to continue on. These were always frustrating and usually resulted in me having to look up online how to get what I need to continue. I think the game could have given the player a little bit more direction to help them find what they need to progress. I also felt a steep decline in enjoyment near the end game when I pretty much had all of the resources I needed. Suddenly, there was nothing for me to do but to do the spirit requests, and that got a little monotonous when it's not broken down by the farming gameplay, which I'd mostly stopped engaging with as it had become somewhat tedious and I felt it didn't serve much of a purpose anymore. This exacerbated the issue of the late game spirits feeling more shallow as I was burning through their story just that much faster. I did enjoy the game though, I laughed, I cried, and I'm glad that I gave it a go. Dredge was one of the last games I played in 2025, and like with Luigi's Mansion, I kinda wish I had played it around October instead of around Christmas. I think I was just feeling too festive to really get into it. Dredge is a Lovecraftian fishing game. You play as a fisherman who, as you traverse the relatively small world, discovers a variety of strange, otherworldly sea creatures. What I liked most about the game was the atmosphere. The art and music convincingly sold the dread and dreariness of the world. It somehow felt both tense and surprisingly casual. Like the inhabitants of the world were just used to seeing all the weird shit that was going on around them. The gameplay felt fun and rewarding, and discovering new species of fish and areas to explore was enjoyable at first. I think the game quickly loses its luster after a while, and it's unable to maintain that eeriness you feel early on. As you go along, you sort of stop feeling scared of the various things out to get you, and they become more annoying rather than scary. As you upgrade your gear, you wind up having too many tools at your disposal to really be affected by any external threat, and I also found the fishing gameplay to have a severe drop in enjoyment around the midpoint. At a certain point, the novelty wore off and fishing became mostly a chore. I think there needed to be at least 10 more species of fish to discover. At some point, I felt I wasn't discovering any new species and stopped bothering with the fishing outside of having to grind for money, and I also think there could have been a few more side quests. Some of the characters in the game felt a little bit underutilized. You would see somebody once and then do their quest, and then you would never talk to them again, really. Overall, a solid experience, and I would definitely recommend the game, especially to anyone who likes horror media and especially Lovecraftian horror. Again, I think it was mostly a right game at the wrong time for me to fully enjoy it though. I had no idea what to expect from No Case Should Remain Unsolved since I stumbled upon it by complete chance, and I was pleasantly surprised. You play as a detective who's tasked with uncovering the mystery of a kidnapping case of a young girl, and you do so by questioning a related party who's been put into psychiatric care. And this is happening like some years after the fact, I think. I don't fully remember. This is one of those games that I played pretty early on in the year, so some of the details have gone out of my brain. The story is presented non-linearly, with the main objective being to organize various statements by those involved. You have to figure out which character provided what testimony and in what order they gave it to get the complete picture. This made for an interesting gameplay system, almost exclusively done through text, as you unveil the narrative piece by piece of what actually happened. The game reminded me in many ways of Her Story, where you are given snippets of a larger narrative puzzle that forms a whole to be constructed by the player, yet the game also does this much differently than Her Story, so it still felt quite fresh. Check it out, it was pretty good and pretty short. I think I played it in like one afternoon. During my time playing a long-ass game, which will likely be a few entries after this one, I needed a break and picked up A Little to the Left, knowing it'd be short and would engage me in a different way from the longer title, and it certainly didn't disappoint. A Little to the Left was a right game, right time kind of game for me. It was exactly what I needed as a brief intermission on the larger undertaking of that other game. I completed both the main game and the game's 2 DLCs, and thoroughly enjoyed my time with the game for the 2 sittings it took me to beat it. Not all puzzles are created equal, some definitely stood out above others, but not a single one comes to mind when I think about which ones I disliked. I especially enjoyed those with multiple solutions, as I had a lot of fun trying to figure out all the possible solutions. I would love to see a sequel to this. I know they still do daily puzzles, but I don't find it to be enticing enough to pop into the game just to do one brain tease a day. I would rather just pay for another full game's worth of puzzles. Lorelei and the Laser Eyes is a puzzle adventure game, and a damn good one at that. I was first drawn in by its unique art style, being completely grayscale with the exception of a stark neon magenta splattered throughout. The puzzles were well designed. I don't recall getting stuck on any of them, and traversing through the mansion felt intuitive and rewarding. Still, I must admit to myself that the game didn't have much staying power. I'm writing this some months after playing, and I can't for the life of me remember anything that happened in the game. Something about a filmmaker, an artist, and a magician, right? I remember there was a dog there. That's all I got. I do remember that I liked the story when I initially played it, but what that story was has left the building. Great game, check it out, and if you do, please tell me what the hell it was about. Mouthwashing is a game I enjoyed more in hindsight than in the moment. It's a fantastic, tight little experience with a lot of minutia for those wanting to dig deeper. I've never been the biggest horror person, so it was never gonna be a favorite for me, but I nonetheless found myself engrossed by the narrative within and the non-linear way it was told. While I don't like horror, I do love a good puzzle, and trying to piece together what exactly is going on, why, and when kept my brain moving and my eyes glued to the screen. I've also found all the think pieces on the game that I looked into after playing it to be some good food, so keep it up, y'all. Despite that, I also can't help but feel the hype was a bit overblown. Like, yeah, it's a good game, a great game even, but like, guys, it's not the second coming of Christ. I feel as though hyperbole on the internet can sometimes make great things feel lesser, as it's not feasible for any game to live up to expectations when they're set so high. I kind of wish I hadn't engaged with video game discourse before playing Mouthwashing, as I just wound up expecting the world of it. So when it wasn't the mind-blowing out-of-this-world experience I was told it would be, and instead just a great game, I couldn't help but feel a little bit underwhelmed. I also felt when the game threw in some gameplay, it was at its weakest, and all the gameplay segments were pretty bad. I wish they had just stuck to it being a walking sim from start to finish. But I don't want to be dismissive, because like I said, I did really like it, so I won't. Mouthwashing is a great game and deserves the public recognition it's received. Let's just maybe cool it a tiny bit. I was feeling a little bit of a puzzle/detective game fatigue, so I decided to take a break by dipping back into the action-adventure genre. And what better way to do that than with the all-reliable Zelda? I'm a latecomer into the franchise, as I wasn't a Nintendo kid when growing up, so I'm slowly but gradually catching up on some of the older Zeldas, and I decided my next adventure would be the Minish Cap. Why? I don't really know. There was just something about it drawing me in. It looked pretty cute. I found myself really enjoying the game and loving this version of Hyrule. It's mostly just classic 2D Zelda with some fun twists here and there. There's the whole shrinking mechanic, of course, but one mechanic I found myself becoming completely engrossed by was the Kinstone mechanic. It was just such a unique way to engage with the world that gave it a lot of charm, and I'm kind of surprised it's never been revisited. The charm started to wear off a bit after a while once I realized it was a bit of a shallow system, but I would love to see a version of this be iterated on in a future entry, hopefully with a bit more intentionality. Overall, a fun and laid-back adventure through Hyrule, probably not one that'll rank all too highly on my list of Zeldas, but it's Zelda. You can't really go wrong with Zelda. Blueprints came out of nowhere last year and overtook gaming discourse. If somehow you missed it, Blueprints is a puzzle roguelike for better or for worse. This game is polarizing for a reason. It is both a brilliant game with excellent ideas and also one of the most frustrating gaming experiences you can have. I'm not gonna get into details, as I'm pretty sure I just end up echoing every sentiment voiced by Pixel a Day in her fantastic video on the game, so just go and watch that if you're interested. I'll link that down below in the description. What I will add though is that Blueprints has some incredible storytelling that I feel gets somewhat unfairly sidelined in the discourse. I was deep in the trenches when piecing everything together. I wanted to know everything I could about the world of the game. It is so fascinating. I love a story that's like 90% world building that has to get slowly unraveled by the reader, and games like Blueprints are the perfect medium for these kinds of stories. A shame that I probably won't ever revisit the game to uncover it all. Too much of the story feels walled off from all the tedium of the late game puzzles, and I'm just not gonna do that to myself. If there's one thing I hate, it is a game that doesn't respect your time, and Blueprints certainly does not respect your time sometimes. There are too many other more fun ways I could be spending my free time, but never say never though. I have no idea what Cocoon was all about, but it was weird, it was beautiful, and it had very unique gameplay ideas. My interest in it was first piqued when it won Best Debut Indie at the Game Awards in 2023, somewhat controversially so, since it was produced by Annapurna. So the question of whether it truly is an indie or not was bound to enter the discourse, as it always does for the two indie categories. Cocoon was also a bit of a surprise to me, as I had literally never heard of the game prior to it winning the award. I like to think I have my finger on the pulse when it comes to gaming discourse, at the very least that of the past few years. So for a game to come out of left field like that, I was intrigued. I didn't commit to the purchase though until Black Friday when it went on sale, and I splurged on a bunch of indies. And I'm glad I did, as it ended up being a wonderful 4-hour experience. Cocoon is a puzzle adventure where you play as a little bug guy exploring different biomes of this weird alien world. And as you explore, you must use various orbs to jump between the biomes and unlock the path forward. I love the biotechnology aesthetic, so I was somewhat predisposed to liking this, and I found the main gameplay mechanic to be so interesting and unique. I don't think I've ever seen anything like it done before. As I said, I have no idea what the story of the game is supposed to be, and I kind of love that, which is a bit of a strange feeling for me, as I'm very much a story player first and foremost. I would actually be interested in hearing some plot summaries of the game, as I think there's a lot to dig in there, and since the game doesn't have any text whatsoever, I think it allows for a lot of interesting interpretations. An A+ games, I fucking love weird artsy games. Check it out. I don't know if you heard this, but Silksong came out this year, and because of that, I decided to finally play its predecessor, Hollow Knight. I was very hesitant entering Hollow Knight, as it's pretty much everything that I'm not especially interested in when it comes to gaming. It's a side-scrolling, Souls-like Metroidvania platformer, all of which are genres that I've never really cared for all that much. That's why I put it off for this long, and I'm glad I did, as I don't think I would have enjoyed the game had I played it at any other point in my life prior, because I did in fact quite enjoy my time with it, despite not being a fan of the other games in this genre. Hollow Knight just is that girl. Now, I'm never gonna be the game's biggest fan, don't get me wrong. It being a side-scrolling Souls-like Metroidvania platformer is always going to somewhat temper my enjoyment of the game, but I nonetheless very much enjoyed what Team Cherry did with the game. The art is stunning, the music is beautiful and haunting, the world building is insanely detailed, and I gradually got engrossed in the gameplay as well once I figured out what the hell I was doing. Believe the hype, it's a phenomenal game that deserves all the praise it's received. I still haven't beat the Radiance though, maybe one day if I'll ever return to it. Oh, and I also played both of the DLCs. I guess I should preface that, but I don't think I finished the God one. Wait, God Home? Is that what it's called? I don't remember. The latter one. I definitely finished the Circus one though, I think. I did buy Silksong on launch day after spamming the refresh button all day long on Steam until I finally got through. I don't know why I was in such a rush to get it, because, you know, I hadn't finished Hollow Knight at the time. But I don't know, there was just something about the moment, about the hype, and about the excitement of the launch that I wanted to be a part of it. And so I did. I bought it. And I've played about like half of it. I think, at the very least, I'm like a decent way into Act 2. I think I'm about to be done with Act 2. And I have very mixed opinions, but I'll leave those for next year once I beat the game. All I'll say is that I'm in no rush to finish anytime soon, but I think I'm finally starting to, quote, get it. Chants of Sennaar is a detective game about languages. You play as this little dude who's climbing a tower, an obvious nod to the biblical story of the Tower of Babel. As you climb, you encounter various societies living on the tower, with each one having their own language the player must decipher to progress. I absolutely love this game, although I knew I would due to my affection for the detective game genre and stories exploring human interaction. This was also one of the first games I played this year, and it was so nice to start the year off with a bang. I never got bored of the gameplay loop. Filling out each word in each language and picking up the nuances within them was incredibly satisfying. On top of that, it's an absolutely stunning game, very stylized, and shows how a little goes a long way. One aspect I wasn't a huge fan of was the stealth segments. It just felt like a random shakeup in the gameplay. But the segments were fairly easy and never overstayed their welcome, so I didn't mind it too much. But I still would have rather just not had them in the game, to be honest. Chants of Sennaar is an incredible game that I can easily recommend to anyone who likes puzzle exploration indies. We're reaching the end here with only my top 5 games left of this year. And coming in 5th place is The Root Trees Are Dead, which is yet another detective game. I tried this game, and by far the best one of the bunch. The game is clearly inspired by Return of the Obra Dinn, as is evident by the gameplay and the whole deductions lock in after you guess 3 of them correctly aspect of it, but I also felt a direct influence from her story with the way you go about gathering information. The premise of the game is that an affluent family known as the Root Trees die in a plane crash, and as such, you are hired to map out the entire family tree in order to figure out who is owed inheritance, and who might not be. You do so by searching up information on potential relatives on the internet, as well as other online databases of both the public library and newspaper archives. With these tools, you must fill in the family tree with each blood relative's name, portrait, and occupation. The game weaves an intriguing and often humorous narrative of the Roottree family, who earned their wealth from starting a candy production business in the 1920s, which you discover bit by bit as you uncover each Roottree's personal history. This is exactly the type of detective game I was looking for, one where you truly have to uncover the narrative for yourself in order to get the whole picture. But even though I enjoyed the first part of the game thoroughly, I found the post-game Roottree Mania edition in the Steam remaster to be the highlight of my playthrough, as you're prompted to dive even deeper into the family history and are given even less information to start with. This makes you actually feel like you're playing detective, as you have to just work with what limited information you're given, which you then have to dig deep into to get the full picture. I really hope that this game will become the blueprint for detective games of the future, as it is, in my opinion, the best showcase of the genre as of yet, at least of the detective games that I have personally played. I'm excited to see what else the developer has to offer as well, and will be keeping my eye out for future game reveals from them. Coming in 4th place is the 100 Line Last Defense Academy, which is a mouthful and a half, so I'll just be calling it the 100 Line from here on. I was a huge Danganronpa fan back in the day and an even bigger Zero Escape fan, so when I heard that the creative minds behind both franchises, Kazutaka Kodaka and Kotaro Uchikoshi, respectively, were forming their own independent studio, I was very intrigued, to say the least. I still entered the game somewhat skeptical since I disliked both of Danganronpa and Zero Escape's latest entries, but I was so happy when the 100 Line turned out to be excellent. The game is mostly a visual novel with tactical RPG gameplay segments spread throughout, which I was pleasantly surprised were pretty fun, considering neither creatives heading the project have much experience with game design outside of visual novels. The real highlight of the game, though, has to be the story. It's an incredibly well-written sci-fi narrative with many mysteries, twists, and turns throughout, as is the signature stylings of both Kodaka and Uchikoshi. My biggest flaw, though, has to be the length. It took me a little over 270 hours to complete it, and I can't say all those hours were created equal. I understand they wanted the novelty of the game having 100 endings, but I'm always a proponent of quality over quantity, and many of the routes are just straight up superfluous filler. The 2 box routes dragged in particular for me, as did the romance route that I felt could have been cut entirely. I also found the gameplay segments to get stale near the end game, especially since most routes have the exact same battles. Once I'd fully upgraded everyone's weapons and had become way too OP for the enemy, I just started to skip every battle. This also really messed with the pacing, in my opinion, since if you're not engaging with the RPG elements of the game, it just becomes a straight up visual novel, which I don't mind, but without the shakeup in gameplay, I grew fatigued with reading it much faster than I otherwise would have. Still, these are minor gripes, and I otherwise absolutely love the game to death and would highly recommend it to any visual novel fan out there. My 3rd place entry is a game I have yet to complete as of writing and recording, but I feel like I'm far enough into it that I think I can safely rank it here, and I suspect I will have hit credits by the time I finish editing the video. Unicorn Overlord is an SRPG from Vanillaware and an absolute banger. I loved 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim by Vanillaware that came out some years ago. It was my favorite game that year, so I was immediately excited for Unicorn Overlord when it was revealed. I started playing it early in 2025, but it didn't really click with me right away, so I put it down. And I'm so glad I did, because when I picked it back up later in the year when I had more time to dedicate to it, I fell in love with it. I was surprised by how much I loved the gameplay since it's mostly an auto-battler, but I quickly found myself obsessively updating the various characters' gear and actions to get the most efficient soldiers on the battlefield. I also love a good affection system, so I would spend hours upon hours pairing up the right characters in my units to make sure I could see every line of dialogue between the different characters. Though I did end up missing out on Gamel and Mandarin on my initial playthrough because I made the wrong dialogue choices. That might warrant a replay at some point. The report system reminded me a lot of the affection system in Triangle Strategy, which I similarly completely lost myself to when I played it. I also felt the gameplay was a little bit too easy, but that one's on me. Since I played the game on normal difficulty, I probably should have gone with hard. But you know, you live and you learn. My gripes were minor, namely that the gameplay started to overstay its welcome a little bit near the end game, especially once I started running out of report scenes, and so I was eventually just powering through the main campaign. I just wish there were more rapport conversations to be seen between different characters. I don't imagine they would have been too hard to add, so I think they should have given us just a tad bit more in that regard. I also wish the marriage scene when choosing a male partner had been done better. Just let me be a gay king, okay? I chose Lex, by the way, obviously, best friends to lovers. It just hits sometimes. But all in all, I love the game, and now that I'm 2 for 2 on Vanillaware games, I'm considering going back into their catalog to see if there are some hidden gems to be found there. And of course, whenever they drop their next game, me and my wallet will be there, day one. My second place entry is a game that I've been playing for years at this point, or I think more accurately, I should say I've been reading it for years. What a journey it has been, one with a bittersweet ending as I will miss my time with the game, but all good things must come to an end, even this behemoth of a visual novel. Umineko When They Cry is one of the most notorious visual novels in the world due to its massive length, yet it is also recognized as one of the best visual novels ever written. A sentiment I will echo, I'm not gonna argue that, it is incredible. Red Bard made a video discussing its length, so check that out if you're interested, I'll link it down below in the description. Describing Umineko is no small feat, it is so unique in its storytelling and presentation that I don't think there's anything like it. What begins as a murder mystery slowly, and I do mean slowly, becomes a philosophical discussion of the genre it belongs to and the art of storytelling as a whole. Umineko makes me want to rethink every story I've ever experienced with this new lens I've now been given. To say the game has changed my perspective on storytelling would be an understatement. Now, that's not to say that Umineko isn't without its flaws. The length, I would say, is a major flaw, as it doesn't feel entirely justified to me. I don't mind a long text at all, but I think a text needs to justify its length, and Umineko just doesn't always do that. The author could have trimmed the fat a bit more to make the story tighter and maintain the flow a bit more. The action scenes especially could drag like nobody's business, and I would have cut like maybe half of them. I also thought the gender politics of the work felt sometimes outdated and often made me a little bit uncomfortable, though on occasion it could almost feel radical in its approach. But it's kind of hard to judge Umineko on its flaws when everything else is above and beyond what anyone else in the space is doing. The word masterpiece is overused in the video game space, with critics and reviewers alike using it to describe any game they enjoyed. But I can't think of a more fitting word to describe Umineko. It is a generation-defining work, or it should be if more people could just get through the damn thing, and if visual novels were more of a respected medium. But you might be thinking, you're waxing poetic about this game to high hell, and yet it's only coming in at number 2? That's because my number 1 game I played in 2025 is 1000x Resist is a flawless game in my opinion. There's not a single thing I would have changed about it. I played it early on in the year, and right away I knew it was going to be my game of the year. Although not really game of the year because it did not come out this year, but you know what I mean. The game is mostly a walking sim with a rich narrative throughline, but man, what a narrative. It is so good. The way this game explores complex topics like revolution, racism, xenophobia, oppression, isolation, and community as if it's nothing is astounding. So what's the game about? Where do I start? I don't even know. You play as Watcher, one clone in a society of clones who is tasked with exploring the memories of the girl they're a clone of, Iris. Through these memories, we learn of Iris's home life leading up to an apocalyptic event where an alien disease wipes out all of humanity, aside from Iris herself, who for whatever reason is immune to the disease. She's taken off to a military facility and eventually ends up cloning herself, and that's all I'll say. This is truly a story you have to experience for yourself. There is so much care put into every line of dialogue, so much so that they have multi-layered usage throughout the story, if you know you know. And the structure of the narrative is impeccable. The art is also stunning, strong use of visual language to convey the message, and fantastic character design, which is saying a lot considering all the characters are literally the same girl. This is the best example of a game using theory from the realm of fine art and applying it to the field of video games, in my opinion. Though that's an assumption on my part based on some cursory research I made on the studio out of curiosity, and just my own personal history with and knowledge of fine art. By the time I hit credits, I just sat there in awe of what I just experienced. This is the type of rare experience that I will always treasure when I hit a goldmine such as this game, and 1000x Resist will be lingering in my thoughts for years to come. If you like thoughtful sci-fi, something like Arrival or any of Ursula K. Le Guin's sci-fi novels, you will love this game just as much as I did. Hacky Almo sisters, hair to hair. So there you have it, that's my list. Congrats to 1000x Resist and Sunset Visitor on getting the top spot. They win, I don't know, this ugly drawing of a cat. No, seriously, I will actually frame this and send it to you if you want it. My business email can be found on my channel. Before I head up though, I want to talk about my goals for 2026. Since I finished 30 games this year, it's only logical to shoot for 40 games in 2026. I think I can manage it, but it's not super serious. I mean, if I don't reach 40, then oh well. Quality over quantity after all, right? I would also like to play more broadly in 2026. I think I went a bit too hard on detective and puzzle games last year, and I'm definitely not abandoning those genres, but I would like to explore some other genres a bit more. So in 2026, I want to hit credits on at least one game that falls under the following: a JRPG, a large open world RPG, a horror game, a visual novel, an FPS, a puzzle game, a platformer, a walking sim, and just for fun, let's throw in a rhythm game as well. Mainly because I have one on my backlog that I've been thinking about checking out. Another part of my mission to play more broadly is that I want to use my different consoles more this year. I went hard on the Steam Deck in 2025 and I absolutely love my Steam Deck, but I have all these different consoles just lying around, mostly untouched and neglected. So another goal will be to complete one game on each console I own, those being Switch, PSP, 3DS, Wii U, and the PS5 that I just recently bought on a Black Friday deal and have yet to set up as I gotta finish Unicorn Overload first, which I'm playing on my PS4. I don't see much of a point in setting up my PS5 until I store my PS4 away somewhere. There are also a handful of games that I've started and played a significant amount of that I would like to finish this year. I have some games on my PSP that I've been playing on and off for a while, and I think I need to just sit down and finish them. Persona 2 Innocent Sin is one of them. I started it like over a year ago and enjoyed it fine enough, but the gameplay definitely doesn't hold my attention as much as Personas 3 to 5 do. I'm just not much of a dungeon crawler type of player, which funnily enough, Etrian Odyssey 3 is also on this list, which I've been playing on and off on my 3DS. And that's just straight up dungeon crawler. I don't know why I'm getting into that series, but okay. Final Fantasy VI, I've similarly been playing on and off, and I'm not exactly sure why I ended up putting it down, because I was really enjoying it. I guess life just got in the way. It's so easy to get distracted off of long RPGs. I started Tales of Eternia about a year ago and was really enjoying it until I got stuck on some dungeon and just put it down, never to be picked up again. I definitely need to just power through that dungeon and keep at it. I also bought and started a playthrough of the Dragon Quest III remaster late last year, but immediately clocked that I wasn't gonna have the time or energy to dedicate to it. So I've put it on the back burner for now, but I definitely want to pick that back up this year. I also recently started Another Craft's Treasure, and I'm enjoying it, although it being a Souls-like is definitely working a little bit against me. But I will power through it for Krill. I love him. And of course, I expect to finish Silksong this year as well, like I said, hopefully. Some other games that are high on my backlog at the moment. Octopath Traveler 0 is definitely going to be the next game I whip out. Octopath is my girl, my bitch, my one, my only, and I intended on playing 0 on day 1. But it turns out video game sellers in my country suck, and no one bought any stock of it. The curse of living in a small country, I guess. I had to ship a Switch copy in, which just arrived a few days ago, so I'm excited to dig into it once I finish up some of these other games I'm playing right now. Neo: The World Ends With You is up there as well. The first one is one of my favorite games of all time, and I bought the second on launch, only to store it away and never touch it. Hopefully this year will be the year I finally whip it out. I also want to get to Expedition 33 at some point. I've been trying to get it on physical, but it's been sold out everywhere. No surprise there. I'll get a copy someday and I'll play it and probably love it, right? And I would also like to just play any PS5 game. Obviously, I want to see what the consoles got on offer since I've been sort of missing out, though I have no idea where to start. I bought 4 games for it already: Stellar Blade, Metaphor Refantasio, Final Fantasy 16, and the My Sims Cozy Bundle of all things. It was like $5 at a local store, and I can't help it. I will forever be a Sims girly at heart, despite EA's endless well of controversies. Anyway, that's gonna be the end of the video. That's my 2025 ranking and my plan for this current year. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed and hope you have a happy 2026, I guess. Let me know if you played any of the games I mentioned or if I've convinced you to try any of them out, and drop some recs of your own. I'd love to find some new hidden gems. Also, someone drop a plot summary of Lorelei and the Laser Eyes. I genuinely do not remember anything about this game. Okay, bye.